Welcome to a fascinating journey through history, where we'll explore an often overlooked perspective on one of the most significant events in human history, the trial and crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Our story comes from a letter allegedly written by Claudia Procula, the wife of Pontius Pilate, to her friend Fulvia. This letter sheds light on why Pilate was so reluctant to condemn Jesus. Let's dive in. Claudia Procula was just 16 when she married Pontius Pilate, a man old enough to be her father. When Pilate was appointed as the Roman governor of Judea, they moved to this distant province. Claudia writes,
"Without happiness, but also without apprehension, I went away with my husband. I was very homesick for you, for the quiet residence of my parents, the happy haven of Nabron, the beautiful statues, the soft groves of my birthplace."
Life in Judea wasn't easy. The local people, especially the religious leaders, resented their Roman rulers. Claudia found herself isolated in a foreign land. In this challenging environment, Claudia found an unexpected friend, Salome, the wife of Jairus, a synagogue leader. Through this friendship, Claudia was introduced to Jewish beliefs. She writes,
"Sometimes they spoke to me of the God of their ancestors, and read parts of their holy books. I perceived that he was omnipotent and merciful, and combines in himself kindness, purity, and greatness."
This exposure to Jewish monotheism had a profound effect on Claudia. She even began to pray to this God, finding comfort in times of loneliness. One day, Claudia learned that Salome's young daughter, Semida, had died. She rushed to comfort her friend. What happened next would change Claudia's life forever. She describes the scene. This miraculous event left an indelible impression on Claudia.
"I was deeply saddened by the news, so I rushed with my child to join the mourners and Salome, the mother, in grieving. When we arrived at their house, it was so crowded that my servants struggled to make a path for us through the mass of people. Many mourners and onlookers had gathered outside my friend's home. Suddenly, I noticed the crowd parting to let a group of men approach the house. People watched them with great interest and respect. In the front, I recognized Semida's father. Surprisingly, instead of looking sad as I expected, he had a hopeful expression that puzzled me. Walking with him were three other men dressed in simple worn clothes that suggested they were poor and uneducated. Behind this group was another man, dressed similarly, who appeared to be in the prime of his life. I looked up to get a better view of him. However, his appearance was so striking that I had to quickly look away and lower my gaze to the ground, much like how one has to look away from the bright sun. There seemed to be a glow around his forehead, and his hair hung in long curls on his shoulders, styled in the way typical of people from Nazareth.
This man was Jesus of Nazareth, and it was probably the first time Claudia saw Jesus. She watched in awe as Jesus approached Semida's body.
I can't fully describe how I felt when I saw him. It was the most intense emotion I've ever experienced. His face was incredibly beautiful, but his eyes were so powerful that they made me feel like I could turn to dust just from his glance. This created a sense of awe and fear in me. I followed him without him noticing. When the door opened, I saw Semida lying on a bed surrounded by candles and sweet-smelling incense. She looked even more beautiful in her peaceful state. Her forehead had a pale pink color, like the rose placed on her. You could see signs of death around her eyes and on her closed lips. Salome, her mother, stood beside her, looking numb and unaware of her surroundings. She didn't seem to notice me at all. Semida's father fell at the feet of the mysterious man I mentioned earlier. This man approached Semida's bed. Her father, pointing to his daughter, cried out, "Oh my lord, death has taken my daughter, but if you wish it, she will come back to life." When I heard these words, I trembled. My heart seemed to stop beating for reasons I couldn't explain. The man took Semida's hand and, looking at her intently, said, "Young woman, get up." Amazingly, Semida rose from her bed as if an invisible force was lifting her. Her eyes opened, and her lips showed signs of life again. She reached out her hands and called, "Mother!" This cry snapped Salome out of her daze. Mother and daughter embraced, overwhelmed with emotion. Jairus, Semida's father, fell at the feet of the man he had called Lord. Kissing the hem of his garment, he asked, "What must I do to have eternal life?" The man simply replied, "Love God and love people." After saying this, He vanished as quickly as a shadow disappeared in bright light. I found myself on my knees, not realizing how I got there. Then, feeling as if I was waking from a dream, I stood up and went home. I left behind a family experiencing a joy so profound it's impossible to put into words.
When Claudia told her husband about what she had witnessed, Pilate's response revealed his complex view of Jesus.
At dinner, I told Pontius about what I had seen and heard. He bowed his head and said,
"You saw Jesus of Nazareth. He's hated and looked down upon by the Pharisees, Sadducees, Herodians, and the proud Levites from the temple. This hatred grows stronger every day, and they're always thinking of ways to kill him. But the things Jesus says are wise, and his miracles truly seem to be from God."
But why do they hate him so much?
Because he exposes their bad behavior and hypocrisy. I once heard him say to the Pharisees, "You're like painted tombs and a bunch of snakes. You put heavy burdens on others but don't lift a finger to help. You're careful about small religious rules but ignore the important things like justice and mercy." These words hit hard and are true. He offended these proud, showy people, and I'm worried about what might happen to him.
Feeling upset, I exclaimed, "But you'll protect him, won't you?"
I'm not powerful enough to stand up to these angry, miserable people. Besides, I'd feel terrible if I had to hurt this wise man.
After saying this, Pontius got up and went to another room, deep in thought. I was left feeling incredibly sad and worried.
Pilate understood the political danger Jesus posed to the religious establishment, but he also recognized Jesus' wisdom and the divine nature of his miracles. Pilate's actions during Jesus' trial.
As Passover drew near, many people from all over Judea came to Jerusalem. This was a very important holy day for the Hebrews. On Thursday before the holiday, people would usually bring their sacrificial animals to the temple in a big procession. Before this holy day, Pontius warned me that Jesus of Nazareth was in great danger. He said that people were plotting against him, and he might be handed over to the high priest that very evening. I was so scared when I heard this that I started shaking. I asked my husband, "You'll protect him, won't you?" Pontius replied with a sad look, "Can I?" It seems Jesus might face the fate Plato predicted for righteous people: persecution, contempt, and a cruel death. When I went to bed, I couldn't sleep. Suddenly I had a vision. I saw Jesus as Salome had described their God. His face shining like the sun, flying on cherub wings, with fire obeying his commands. He stood on a cloud, ready to judge people. With one gesture, he separated the good from the bad. He lifted the good to eternal salvation, but threw the bad into a terrifying fiery sea. Then he showed his wounds and said in a frightening voice, "Give me back my blood which I spilled for you." The wicked begged for the earth to swallow them, but they couldn't escape. What a revelation! At dawn, I woke up scared. I heard shouting from the town center, growing louder like ocean waves. My heart raced and I broke into a cold sweat. The noise got closer, and a huge crowd gathered at the courthouse. Worried, I took my son and hurried to my husband. At the court hall door, I peeked through the curtains. What a sight! Pontius sat on his ivory throne, looking majestic but clearly concerned. Jesus stood before him, hands tied, clothes torn, forehead bloody, but calm and peaceful. Around him was an angry mob: guards, servants, Levites, and Pharisees with law scrolls on their heads. They all looked furious, their faces seeming to glow with an evil fire. At last, after my husband signaled for silence, the crowd quieted down. "What is your request?" he asked. "We demand the death of this man, Jesus of Nazareth," one of the priests responded for the people. "Herod sent him to you for judgment." The crowd erupted again. "He predicted the destruction of the temple and claims to be the King of the Jews, the Christ, the Son of God," the Levites shouted. "He has offended the priests. Crucify him!" cried the angry crowd. Their shouts still echo in my ears, and I can still see the image of the innocent victim. Pilate turned to Jesus and asked, "Are you the King of the Jews?" "You say so," Jesus answered. "Are you the Christ, the Son of God?" Pilate asked again, but Jesus remained silent. The crowd's shouting grew louder, like wild, hungry animals. "Deliver him to us so he may die on the cross." Pilate ordered them to be silent and said, "I find no guilt in this man and acquit him. Crucify him." The crowd roared. Unable to bear it any longer, I sent a servant to ask my husband to come to me. Pontius left the court hall and came to me. I threw myself at his feet and pleaded, "For the sake of all you hold dear, and for our child, do not spill the blood of this righteous man who resembles the immortal God. I dreamt of him last night, surrounded by divine majesty, judging mankind. Among those cast into hell, I saw the faces of those who now demand his death. Beware, a single drop of his blood could bring you eternal damnation." "All this frightens me too," Pontius replied. "But what can I do? The Roman guards are few, and the people seek revenge, not justice. Be quiet. Claudia, go with the child to the garden. Your eyes should not witness such a spectacle." He left, and I wept in despair. Jesus endured the mockery and beatings with patience, his suffering inflaming the crowd even more. Pontius returned to his throne. The crowd immediately resumed their brutal demand, "Put him to death." Following an old custom, the governor would free a condemned criminal on Easter, showing mercy. Pontius saw this as a way to release Jesus and asked the crowd, "Whom do you want me to release, Barabbas or Jesus called Christ?" "Set Barabbas free," they shouted. Barabbas was a notorious robber and murderer. "And what shall I do with Jesus of Nazareth?" Pilate asked. "Crucify him," they cried. "What evil did he do?" Pilate asked. "He shall be crucified," they howled with increasing fury. In despair, Pilate bowed his head. The crowd's insolence grew. Pilate feared for his authority and the Roman power. The uproar was like nothing I had ever heard. The only calm face was that of the victim. Jesus, despite the beating, jeering, and imminent death, remained serene. His eyes, which had given life to Jairus' daughter, looked at his tormentors with peace and love. He suffered but gladly, his soul seeming to ascend. The hall was packed, like a foaming stream from Mount Zion to the Praetorium. New voices joined the hellish choir every minute. Finally my husband gave in. Pilate rose, doubt and fear on his face. He washed his hands in a basin and said, "I am not guilty of this righteous man's blood. His blood be on us and our children." The crowd roared. The executioners took Jesus away. My eyes followed him. The innocent victim led to slaughter. Suddenly, my vision dimmed, and I felt my life ending. My maidservants led me to a window overlooking the court. I saw traces of spilled blood. "They scourged him here," one servant said. "They crowned him with thorns there," another continued. "The soldiers mocked him, calling him King of the Jews, and slapped his face," remarked a third servant. Each word pierced my heart. I felt a supernatural event would occur. The heavens seemed to share my sorrow. Dark, threatening clouds filled the sky, lightning flashing and thunder echoing. Suddenly, the town became calm, a deadly silence. At the 9th hour, darkness fell, and a thick fog enveloped the court. I clutched my child to my breast. An earthquake began, shaking the earth as if the world was ending. One of my maidservants, a Jewess, came in, pale and frightened. "Doomsday has arrived," she cried. "The temple's Holy of Holies curtain has torn in two. Woe to the holy place." Rumors spread of graves opening and righteous men coming to life again, prophesying God's wrath. Hearing this, I felt I was losing my mind. I went to the stairs and met a centurion from the crucifixion. A brave warrior, he was now overwhelmed and repentant. I wanted to ask him for details, but he passed by saying, "He whom we killed was truly the Son of God." In the great hall, Pontius sat with his face in his hands. When I entered, he looked up in despair. "Oh Claudia, why didn't I listen to you? My heart will never know joy again. Why couldn't I save that wise man?" I couldn't answer him. Our silence was broken by thunder. An old man, Joseph of Arimathea, came to ask for Jesus' body. "Go and take him," Pilate said without raising his head. The old man left, joined by some women. Thus ended that fateful day. Jesus was buried in a rock-hewn cavern, with a guard posted at the entrance. But, O Fulvia, on the third day he rose again, victorious and radiant. He showed himself to his disciples and then to the people. His disciples testified to this, even to the point of martyrdom, spreading his gospel throughout the empire. From that day on, my husband's fate worsened. Accused by the Senate and Emperor Tiberius, his life became tormented. Even among Christians, the name of Pontius Pilate is cursed for his role in Jesus' crucifixion. My loneliness grew, and I found solace in Jesus' teachings. Compared to his wisdom, our great teacher's knowledge seemed empty. His words brought me peace. After a few months, Pontius was dismissed. We returned to Europe, wandering from town to town. Pontius bore his sorrow and guilt, and in me, he saw a reminder of his crime. Family life ceased. Our child's death only added to our misery. Christians everywhere spoke of Pilate's role in Jesus' death. Even in remote places, we couldn't escape the curse on my husband's name. Forgive me, Fulvia. Pray for me. May the righteous God help you and give you happiness.